And what I'll do. Yes, they all work. You gotta do. And remember, it takes, yeah, remember, turn on. No, it won't. We've set it up that way. What I'll do though is if I get a question there, I'll just get your attention and I'll talk into that microphone so that everybody can hear. All right, everybody ready? Settle. No extra credit or any, How you feeling?
Can I ask you?
How you feeling?
Can we do some creative brows?
As long as you're feeling all right, that's all that matters. Okay. Just big guy. Okay. Can everybody hear me? All right. Stand by, Matthew. We're already been live for the last 5 minutes. I hope you guys didn't say anything bad. Good evening, all. And welcome to I guess it's the third session of CLI, although I guess technically it could be called the fourth class. For those of you who either watch the State of the City or plan to watch the State of the City, you will get credit for that as well. If we have a little time before the end of the night, we can discuss that a bit. As always, I appreciate everybody being here. We do have, as always, at least a cadre of folks online. I do believe we have 3 or 4 folks online. So I remind everybody that we do need to speak up and repeat questions, and I will, of course, relay questions from any of those folks online as we go through the night. In case you've forgotten, bathrooms are out that door to the left. And we will try to take a break at some point in the evening if anybody needs to do anything, or if you need to take a break, please do so. All right. This is one of the fun nights of the class, because this is essentially the only night of the whole series where we take one particular area, in this case, development services, and tell you all about that particular area, because it is a very, very critical part of any municipal government, but it's also a very complicated one. It has a number of divisions, a number of facets to it that touch almost all of us in some way, shape, or form if you're a resident of the city. And so what you're going to hear tonight is a couple of different things from different areas of this particular department, which the director is going to hear very briefly, I think, overview and explain before we get started. And you will hear all about the different areas of development services. So let me introduce to you the director of the department, and he comes with not just a host of experience, but places that he's been, number of places that he's been. Florida, Wisconsin. He was the director of planning for the city of La Crosse, Wisconsin for 20 plus years before he came to us 7 years ago? 6 years ago. Yeah, 6 years? 6.8? Not that you're counting. But he's actually a Valley native. He actually grew up in Scottsdale, in the Scottsdale area, and went to Girard Catholic High School in East Phoenix, which was so long ago the school doesn't exist anymore. It's an extended day motel. There you go. What can you do? I went to Catholic high school. I have the scars to show it. Okay. Look at that. Attaboy, Pat. Right here. So to get our night started, here he is, the director of the Development Services Department for the City of Apache Junction, Mr. Larry Kirch.
Thanks, Al. Thank you, Al. I usually don't get that kind of introduction. It's usually something different, isn't it, Rudy? Usually like some nights when we have these public hearings. So I'll take this off for now. All right. So, I grew up in, I say South Scottsdale, like the poor part of Scottsdale at Miller and Osborne. So that is really the... Oh, yeah. Yeah, there is. Yeah. We had 2 dairy farms right by the house, right at Hayden and Indian School Road. That was a sheep drive. It was just like AJ. Probably what AJ was 20, 30 years ago. Well, that's how Scottsdale was in the early, I'd say late 40s, early 50s. So my parents moved here in 1957. The house was only 2 years old, but it was, you know, spitting distance from really the heart of Old Town Scottsdale. So it's a nice place to grow up, to be, because like other folks that grew up in the Midwest maybe, or had a farm around the corner, that's kind of how our neighborhood was. It was kind of maybe like out here, you have the Superstition vistas and just wide open spaces. So, all right, so this is the Development Services Department. I'm going to go through just kind of a broad overview real quick. I'm going to turn it over to Dave Zellner. He's the building official for the city. He'll talk about the building permitting, building safety function. Then I'm going to turn it over. After that, we'll have Victor. Victor is the new code compliance manager. And then I'll have Rudy come and talk about planning, long-range planning. Rudy's been here 31 point something years, so he's been here a long time. So he knows the city better than anybody in this room, I think. So, okay, so we run, at the present time, we have the Planning and Zoning Commission. They meet twice a month, Tuesday nights, the opposite Tuesdays of the City Council. Tess here, of course, new City Council member. She was on the Planning and Zoning Commission for 20 years. Chair of that for not quite all 20, 8 years? 8 years, okay. So essentially and we'll get into this a little more detail, but they hear the rezoning cases, the conditional use permit cases, preliminary plats, final plats, text amendment. That's what we did last night for 2 hours, talk about ordinance amendments for recreational marijuana, cargo containers, and some changes to the subdivision code. So we did that last night. We also have the Board of Adjustment and Appeals. They meet very infrequently. They met more times in the last couple years than in a long time. But essentially, they do what are typically called variances. So say you want to build your house and there's a wash there, or and you need to have a bigger setback. For some reason, we have a lot of cases where someone put the house rather than kind of in the front yard, they may have kind of pushed it in the back, and now they want to have an accessory building or something. We did this recently. The most recent case is where Weeks Wash, I think, went through part of the property. They wanted a guest house. The only place to put the guest house was in the front yard, but the house was so far back it didn't meet code. So we went through there and said, okay, you have something peculiar to your property, Weeks Wash, and your previous owner built the house way in the back. The only place to put the guest house, normally required to be in the back, is in the front yard. So that's what the Board of Adjustment and Appeals does. We have the Public Arts Commission now, and that was started about a year ago. And so now we staff the Public Arts Commission. So the City Council, created 3 sets of ordinances, one to collect arts fees when building permits are issued for multifamily or commercial. And we have, so that's one ordinance to create the fees, another ordinance to create the commission itself, and then the third is the zoning piece in the zoning code that kind of is the operational piece, how we collect the fees, what the purpose of the fees are. But the Arts Commission, as we get commercial development, the council had a pretty lengthy debate about art and what art can do, has done in other cities like Scottsdale, Oro Valley, Mesa. They all have what they call 1% for the arts. So what we do, some people don't like it, and we'll try to keep Dave out of the mix of it because he's at the point where they get the building permit, but he's got nothing to do with the fee. But he has to stand there and tell folks, hey, you owe us. For the project on our favorite project at Meridian and Southern, it's a $100,000 arts fee we're going to collect for that new project. So it's going to be substantial, and it's going to give the Arts Commission some money now to do public art. And so over time, I think it'll help the city. Building and safety, that code has never met, we think. And I think that's good. But they would ask for a variance of the building code. And typically what happens, Dave and his predecessor would work things out with an engineer, architect, and say, hey, maybe a different way to do it. Maybe you don't need a variance from the building code. So we have one, but they never met. Revenue development, I'll talk a little bit about that because I think Fox was here already. Fox Young, he works in our department. But they do, we write grants in our department, and we do corporate partnerships like Republic that helps pay for the fireworks at 4th of July. So we have a corporate partnership program. Friends of AJ and the 2 community development corporations. I don't want to repeat what Fox said, but that's kind of that revenue development function. is Fox runs the 2 nonprofits as a staff person liaison for the Friends of AJ Community Development Corporation. And then we have a grant writer that writes grants, federal grants, and helps mostly the police department, but also writes grants for other city departments. And so this is last year's slide, but essentially with federal grants and other grants, CDBG is a federal grant program. Roughly $2 to $3 million a year we try to write in federal grants. Corporate partnerships, Fox I think has updated that website. Again, I'm going to skip those. The home program is another federal program we apply for every year and try to get money to fix up older homes in the city if you're income qualified. Depends on your number of people in your household, but we try to do 8 homes a year where we qualify people that are low income. We come in and fix up their house. Helps fix up neighborhoods. So part of what we do in development services is not just about building new houses, but it is community development. So we try to do a lot of work in neighborhoods where we can. Code enforcement is part of community development, of getting folks to fix up their property. Building safety is part of that too, where we work with folks where the building might need to come down because it's not safe and maybe a new building gets to go there. So community development is not just long-range planning, planning and zoning, or issuing building permit. It is really the whole aspect of how do we make the community better. And I think we do that with the 2 nonprofits. I think we do it with code enforcement, building safety. We had initiative with was called Strong Sustainable Communities Initiative, working in particular neighborhoods where we would show up on a Saturday with 7 dumpsters, where Republic would donate them, or we would buy one, or the Friends group would buy one. And that kind of has been replaced by the new landfill, or the new contract with Republic Services. So historically, the city used to come by once a month and do big bulk item pickup. When the recession happened, the city had to quit coming by your house once a month. And so unfortunately, since about, I'd say 2008 or 9, people just kept stuff. So if they didn't take it to the landfill on free dump week, they now can take it to the curb with Republic Services, all for their $10.78 a month, I guess, for that. So we were part of that. I'm going to interrupt that story for a second. Sorry, Matthew, because I know he's yelling at me right now. Where is I'll do it a different way. So we were involved in a project with ASU called the Project Cities. So it was a new initiative. We were the guinea pig. So we did a study called Sustainability and Solid Waste. That was the second study that really kind of unearthed kind of what was going on with solid waste collection in the city, that we didn't have large item pickup. We didn't mandate that you had to have garbage collection, which led to a lot of code enforcement issues, if you might imagine the link there between the city eliminating its once a month bulk item pickup, people putting stuff in their backyard for 9 years. And then now I think we've rectified that, but it started with ASU and the Project Cities report, actually a precursor to that. So that is part of community development, we think. So we would go into these neighborhoods, we'd bring in 7 dumpsters. That's kind of been replaced now with, hey, once a month you can just bring your stuff out. But you would actually went into someone's backyard and took 5 truckloads out, and they basically said they hadn't taken their stuff out since the city stopped taking curbside. The other part of that, we had I don't think we have any cases now where people would just have a trailer in their driveway and put in 90 days worth of garbage there. And then every quarter they would go to the landfill for free dump week and take their household waste to the landfill once a quarter. So the city, somewhat controversial, but bit the bullet and decided, hey, we're going to have a RFP. We're going to bid it out. Republic won the bid. It's actually, people were paying about $30 a month. Now it's $10 a month, and you can have someone come and get your trash, which seems a lot easier than, it actually costs you more to put it in your truck and take it to the landfill than have somebody come and get it. So that all started with some of the stuff in our department. This is one that I know Al and Matt have been involved in, the Positively AJ. Again, looking at our image in the community. I think we did a whole study with a history class. We have a report. These reports are all online. You can kind of look at them, was what we can do on our website. But how do we change our image? That was kind of the focus of a couple classes at ASU. One was a pretty cool history class. This one was a continuation of that, along with new revenue sources for the city. We really, as some of you know, we only have sales tax, and we don't have property tax. So this was what else is out there for the city, if anything. We did a study, Rudy was heavily involved in this, on mobile home parks, RV parks, and the future of affordable housing. We have about 30 parks that were in pretty bad shape, and what can we do rezoning-wise, code enforcement-wise, to help not drive people out and drive up their housing costs, but just get them to live in a environment. But part of it was zoning, and is there a mechanism to turn some older parks that may be on septic tanks, whatever, long-term, rezone them and maybe have more affordable housing in there, but not displace people. So that's an interesting study. A graduate student kind of worked on that one. Because we were updating our general plan, we did a big study. They kind of looked at our current general plan and gave us some ideas on how we could approach our general plan. We'll talk about that later. Another project that is just getting off the ground, was talked about here for decades, but is Off-Leash Dog Park. So we work with ASU and the School of Sustainability and the Project Cities program. And again, it was a student-led project. And again, the quality of the reports was based on the quality of the professor and what they got out of their students. This one was a pretty good study, but could have been better. But really what it galvanized the community, I think the two biggest outcomes of all this effort really was the trash, and now we're going to have an off-leash dog park, all because of our relationship with ASU. Another study that Heather Patel, who used to work here, she just went to go work at the county. We did a study called Understanding Homelessness, because it's been an issue in the city on some vacant lots and in and around the downtown, and what issues we can try to be part of the solution. But again, we're a pretty small community compared to other communities. We lack a lot of resources. So I kind of wanted to point those out. That was a slight detour from the regular talk, but just so you know that we do a variety of things in our department and get involved in a lot of different things. At the end, I think we'll talk more about the state land and that 3,000 acres of development. We'll kind of get into that in the general plan in a minute. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dave. Dave Zellner is a building official. He's been here a little over 6 years, I think, as well, along with me, and he's going to talk about what a building official does, why do we have codes, why is it important to inspect buildings and care about where people live and recreate, and why building codes are important.
Better? No. Anything? Nothing? How about? Maybe the hand curve one. That's. I'll go with that.
Can you hear me now?
Oh. Okay, so now we're mic'd up. Okay, so I'm Dave Zellner, just shy of 6 years. I came here from San Clemente, California. I was a plan reviewer over there. I've been a building official, unfortunately, in a few more places than Larry has, been a plan director. So I've got a lot of experience in the East, and I've been both, in addition to being a building official, I've been a superintendent, both commercial and residential, so I have a background in the field. I'm going to take this down. How, does anybody have an idea how old building codes are? I mean, a lot of people think recent, right? You know, last 100 years or so. They actually go back to biblical times. There was actually a Hammurabi's code actually talked about if a building fell down, then they had a way to, go back on the person that built it and stuff. A lot of the modern codes came about because of the Great Fires, London, Chicago. One of the early U.S. codes was a boiler code. So what kind of is the theme is that when we have an event that, causes death, destruction, that kind of thing, that usually led to the development of something to try to prevent it. So the building codes themselves are the minimum standards. Most of what is in the codes has come about because of a specific, it's kind of like reading the instructions on something and it says don't put your hairdryer in the tub, right? Somebody did something at some point and something happened, and so we have building codes. The codes now are moving into just beyond structural and plumbing. You think about it, before electricity, the most dangerous thing we kind of had was, besides boilers, was plumbing and sanitation. That made a lot of people sick. So you have the plumbing codes came along to figure out how do we, get the stuff out of the building and prevent gas from killing people, methane and stuff like that. So we've kind of moved through, building and structure because of tornadoes and stuff. Those codes are there. We've got plumbing, then we got electricity, so people started getting shocked, and we had fires, so then we ended up, with a lot of electrical codes. We're now moving into doing, there are sustainable codes. We don't have those, but we did adopt energy codes. We actually have an amendment in our building administrative code to reduce, for reduced water flows. We match up more with what they do in California. It's kind of like it exists. Why don't we try to extend what we have as a resource by doing that? So the other part of that is one of the things we struggle with here is that there's a philosophy, and it goes on other places. My home is my castle. If I want to build on it or whatever, it shouldn't be an issue with anybody else. And probably 30 years ago, when a house didn't change hands and went on to the kids and all that stuff, it wasn't as big a deal if somebody did something hazardous and stuff like that. But we have a lot of people that have an expectation of how a house will perform, how safe it will be. And as houses turn over and stuff, we discover issues that, were caused by things. So there is, more of a push for enforcement of codes, to require permits, to require inspections. And the end goal is to protect people, but also the value in the community. Okay, so, while we don't have property tax, we still don't want things going into, falling down. We don't want them going into decay, which can happen. And if you go through some of the mobile home parks where we've got 1950, park models and travel trailers that, they have a finite life. We need to kind of move them out. But so we struggle a little bit with, the press and the impression of what we do. But I think we've found more people valuing that we help them. We had a recent person, a house flipper, that, sold his house. He started work without a permit, which happens a lot. But he actually only had one issue discovered during the housing inspection during the sale. And he actually said we helped him, get things done and realize what he needed to do to prevent him having to spend a lot more money after he thought he was done. So that's kind of another thing with with people that do, start work either out of just, I think I can get away with it, or I don't think that, really is covered. They tend to get themselves into something or into, by advancing. An example, we have a lot of people throw up carports. We don't want them blowing down the street. So we've had them go into other people's yards and become debris and all that stuff. So we want them to be reasonably safe and secured and stuff like that. So a lot of people put them up not realizing that, there's some things, minimums they need to meet and stuff like that. Can be location for planning. And in some cases, we have a lot of people do a lot of welding. So we end up with these big welded structures, shade structures, probably going to do fine. The problem is the building code, especially the residential code, is basically a recipe book. It says if you use 2x4s, 16 inches on center, and they're not over 10 feet tall, and you put plywood on the corners and stuff like that, then I can go out and say you've done what you're supposed to, you meet the code, you meet the minimums, it's not going to fall down, here you go, now you can live in it. Some things like the welding of different red iron and stuff together and stuff isn't in that prescriptive, or there's no recipe that I have for it. So the code allows me to kind of work with an engineer who is kind of acts as another chef and says, well, I'm going to come up with a recipe that's similar and meets the same intent, and so then we can accept that. So in a lot of cases, people do something and then they have to go get engineering, which can be costly. Right now, the problem is there's just not the availability of the resource as far as engineers having time to do stuff. We also have, on the commercial side, we do enforce ADA. So there's a federal standard that sets requirements about facilities, access, and in a lot of cases, a lot of people don't realize that if you have an existing building and you do certain improvements to it, you have to comply with the code. One of the ones I see a lot when I go into businesses and stuff around here is one of the requirements is if you have a toilet, you're supposed to have kind of an access area. That's varied over the years as far as the size. But one of the key things is that the flush valve be on the open side. And that's, for access. If I'm in a wheelchair and I get off, then I can go ahead and don't have to reach back across and stuff. But there are plumbers that are convinced that their toilets only come with valves on one side, or the flush control. So we have to let them know that, no, there's a way, and stuff. So that's kind of the big one we see. People do a repair, replace the toilet, now they've got an issue because it's not compliant. And the way the ADA works is that it's not really us that are going to go out and cite somebody, but somebody who is affected by that, the lack of accessibility, can sue the owner and say, you did something you weren't supposed to, and now I can't use the facility like I should, and so I think you need to take care of that and that. Cities that don't enforce ADA have come under court-ordered, injunction, not injunctions, there's another word for it. But anyways, there have been places where the building department has been taken over by the feds. And basically they said, you're not enforcing this and it's causing issues down the line. This is something we're supposed to be making sure happens. So it's kind of, it's written and it's not necessarily enforceable by us except on new construction specifically. But we want to keep from having somebody else telling us how to do all the things here. So we try to make sure that we get that, and we want the community to be accessible. We want you to be in. One of the things that I think a lot of people didn't consider or don't take into consideration is as more people get hip replacements and knee replacements and stuff, some of those things that we think are just for somebody else really can come into benefit for you. You just had your surgery, you can't quite, that bar's there and you can get yourself up. So that accessibility extends beyond the person that's in a wheelchair or somebody that was born with a disability. It becomes useful to a lot of people. So that's kind of one of the areas that we struggle with. So we do one of the other things that a lot of people don't know. So the code basically says if you do any construction activity, you have to have a permit. And then what we have is it's about 4 pages now of exemptions. So there are things that we define and say, okay, this really isn't an issue if you want to do it on your own. So water heaters are a big one. So if you're changing an electric water heater, it's kind of plug and play. It's not a huge thing. The thing we see most violated is they don't run the temperature and pressure relief valve down where it needs to be, and it can spray out and spew. What we do have problems with is people that switch from gas to electric or electric to gas. They don't properly vent, or they don't have the right side, they don't have the breaker in the right location, those kind of issues. So we've basically said, if you're changing like for like, which is a term I don't like, but is used a lot, then, we're not going to, worry about issuing you a permit. If you're changing the type of fuel source or the energy source, then you need to have a permit and inspections to assure that we, that the ventilation's proper. A lot of people don't realize, it's not just getting the exhaust out, it's having the fresh air so the combustion actually occurs correctly and doesn't produce gas. So we run into that in some of our commercial occupancies. We've run into that. They've changed out, they put them, we find them in places, rooms they're not supposed to be in, or rooms that have no air coming in, stuff like that. Are there any questions? Are you getting any questions from the folks at home? Or?
So I was wondering, where do these codes come from? I mean, I can't imagine that you generate all of them, so you adopt from like other cities? Is there like an organization you have this from?
Right, so the codes that we adopted are developed by, at one time there was 3 main bodies. There was a Western version of the International Conference of Building Officials, primarily developed commercial codes and stuff in the West. You had the Southern Building Code Conference in the South. You had BOCA, Building Official Code Administration, kind of in the East. And so the different groups grew up out of different things. So, the boiler codes led to the development of, and plumbing led to the development of the International Association of Mechanical and Plumbing Officials. So you have those codes. Around 2000, you had these 3 different variations at play in a whole bunch of different places, and some people in the South were adopting the one from the West, and it went the other way. And it was very difficult on builders that did things, or like Target, building all over the country, and they got 100 different versions of what's going on. So the 3 bodies came together and they formed the International Code Council. That term has caused some issues or whatever, but the primary reason they wanted it to call it the International is they wanted it to be something that could be used by other people. So Abu Dhabi now uses it. There's some of the Latin American countries are adopting it. So it's the way the code is developed is different industries, different engineers, code officials and stuff submit things that they think are issues. So it's like, so arc faults is a big thing that happened recently. So we had GFIs kind of came into ground fault circuit interrupters, the things that if your hand's damp and you plug something in, it's going to trip so you don't get shocked. So those came into play late 80s, early 90s. I was out in the field when that happened. They were problematic, because the technology wasn't that great. Now they're pretty, everybody's familiar with them, and you push the button and you got lights. So that took care of a certain portion of events related to electrical, mainly the shock hazards. We were still having a lot of fires, and so based on the origin of most of the electrical fires, bedrooms was kind of the big one, and they kind of knew from statistics. They decided, and one of the issues was that as we, run our Romax, we went to using, instead of pipe and wires pulled through the pipe, we were using Romax. It's got the nice covering. It's yellow and orange and white. Well, we were stapling that or nailing it up with little metal horseshoe, fasteners. One of the things that turned out over time that we didn't realize is that if we put that stapler in too tight on that wire and compressed the insulation no longer really served a purpose, and you actually had interaction between the wire and the staple. And then you could have a short and stuff like that. The problem was that, the first answer would have been, okay, we got breakers. The breakers work on a pretty quick surge of a lot of amperage or whatever. The ground faults work a little bit differently than the breaker and are a little more sensitive, but arc faults happen kind of slowly. And so they had to develop a whole new type of device to try to reduce the fires from arc faults. So they're still kind of new. We're in a better position now. I think they came into play 2006-ish, 7 with the National Electric Code. But anyway, that's an example where they brought in statistics and they said, we have this issue. The code the international code, I participated in the 2015 development. Industry makes their recommendations, or different people, different engineers, a lot of forensic engineers that do analysis after events and stuff, and they say, this happened, we need to address this. And so those get presented, and they get voted on by building officials. So the government officials all over, building officials from all over the U.S., are the participants and the voters on the different things. And so you have the Home Builders Association is there, and they've got their kind of things. You've got the concrete companies wanting kind of things to go their way, the wood and stuff. So it's a balance, and there's a lot of discussion. I learned a lot because you have a lot of people coming up and talking about things that I didn't know about that happened in the 40s or the 50s. And the whole reason we have Code X is because of this event. And this, they may even know the person, and so-and-so brought this before you. So a lot of that is, some of the structural code improvements have been because of analysis of like Northridge earthquake or other earthquakes. Every tornado, there's somebody that goes out and looks, and they realize, okay, what happens is, so let's say in the 70s, all the roofs were coming off, right? The trusses and everything. So it's like, oh, we got to anchor those down. So it's like, okay, we start anchoring them down. 10 years later, we have a tornado and the whole house is gone. Well, we didn't really account for, okay, if we get the roof to stay, now it's putting more pressure and it's more likely to take everything. So there's some of that stuff. You do one and you fix one thing and make things safer, and then it impacts something else. So that's kind of why the codes are reviewed every 3 years. We're on the 2018. The review of those, the one thing I'm not a real fan of is that we start looking at the next code before we've even gotten to really enforce the one we're, whatever the 2018, we're already got the 2021 coming out. And now they're starting on the 2024. So there is some push to maybe change that timeline. There are different, in addition to the codes, there are standards. So there's companies that say, okay, this is how you deal with concrete. This is how the rebar. So the codes are in a way just a surface of a whole bunch of other elements. It would probably be a couple of pallets high if we bought all the books that that the codes relate to. So they've gotten a lot more complicated. One of the things I tell a lot of people, we've had post-installed concrete anchors forever. Redheads, wedge anchors, we do epoxy. For a long time, you would get a report from an agency that would say, okay, Simpson presented this, we tested it, and you use it, you space it this way at this size, and it's fine. Probably about 10 years ago, because of things that have happened in the structural codes and stuff like that, you no longer can get something that says, here is your exchange rate from anchor bolts to, wedge anchors. Now all that stuff has to be engineered. And a lot of people, that's, news to them and stuff, so that becomes difficult on our part, is trying to say, hey, you can't just throw these in and say they work in place. We've got to have analysis and proof. So that's some of the dynamics that we deal with, some of the things that can frustrate people. The codes are available online, but they have grown the residential code. So one of the things is they developed a residential code, and because they didn't want builders to have to buy 10 different books, they put the structural, the electrical, the energy code, the mechanical, plumbing are all in one book. And it's, now it's about 1,300 pages, I think, or something. So it's good, but one of the things they just added recently is, if you've heard of insulated concrete forms, so that was a technology where they kind of took styrofoam and they figured out some ways to make it work as a part of a wall that you could pour concrete in. So that became a method of construction. And originally, the companies that developed it would provide the instructions and say, this is how it's done. Well, it's been around long enough now, it has its own 70 pages of code, that go into the rebar, the lintels. I had to read that because somebody submitted plans for an ICF house, and it's like, oh, I got to go learn all this stuff. So that's kind of what happens. Hopefully that answers your question. I was really surprised, Boeing there was a guy at the Code Council that was part of Boeing. And I'm like, you guys are airplanes. And I got to ask somebody else, I said, why is he here? And he was talking a lot. And he said, Boeing has some of the largest buildings in the world because of their factories. And certain decisions or codes that could get implemented could really negatively affect like travel distance, sprinkler spacing, stuff like that. So it's in their interest to participate. And so, he would, if they kind of were going in a way that might have an impact, he was trying to say, okay, well, let's think about this or whatever. So, and it was interesting, each industry, wood, concrete, steel, are kind of trying to, we're better because, and everybody's kind of trying to get their part of the construction dollars. And there's advantages and disadvantages all the way around. So right now, some of the people that use steel or do the ICF are in better shape than the people that use wood, because wood just, double, tripled, or whatever in the last couple of months. So it's having an impact. It's having an impact on us because people are trying to beat price increases. So our activity level is way up. And the demand that, get it out tomorrow is up. So we've kind of been dealing with that. We're going to be adding people to our department. We've had roughly the same number of people. We have 2 permit techs, a plan reviewer, inspector, and myself. I do a lot of the commercial and kind of overflow plan review. And so that's been kind of the number for the last 5 years, and our volume is up over 50% over that 5 years, 20% over last year. And we've got on the books, I think now, we usually do about 130 houses a year. We've got somewhere 500-600. We've got almost 1,200 units. We got a bunch of multifamily coming. So our thing is going that way, so which is good. So are there any other questions?
Dave, I do have a question from the online folks that might be a little ahead of itself, so we'll have to see. The person's asking, they have heard that there have been more citations for code enforcement, and they're wondering if that is the case, and if so, why? But like I said, we might be getting a little ahead of ourselves there.
Well, so there has been an increase in the number of stop work orders on work that was going on. Part of that is an increase in the staff on the code enforcement side and awareness. We're really trying to keep people out of bad situations. They don't necessarily see it that way, but that is our goal. And so if we can get ahead of it and get people educated and say, okay, this is the way, it's easier for me to work with somebody if they say, well, this is what I want to do. And I say, well, this is what you can do. This is one way or another way, or, if you do it this way, you don't need a permit. But when they do it and then you got to go deal with it, it's kind of hard to have a lot of flexibility. But yes, the number of citations for stop works and stuff has increased. That's increased their workload. Part of it, we have a lot of people that are house flippers. That's kind of the big one that we struggle with. We have an older housing stock. Those are turning over. People watch a TV show and say, oh, I got some money. I can go out and I can make some money. And, a lot of that work, if you're doing one toilet, it's one thing. When you've got the whole bathroom and now you put in the new shower and stuff like that, you need a permit. And we usually catch them when we see all the stuff sitting out in the yard or, piles of drywall on the porch and stuff. There has been some of that increase in activity.
Piggybacking on that, can you just, other than the plumbing and redoing a bathroom, can you just give us some basics of what most people think? Oh, I don't need a permit for that, or don't even think about whether they do or don't need a permit. They just don't get one because but you do, or our city does require a permit.
So we got to repeat the question for the audience.
Yeah, so the question is, what are some some specifics about things that don't require permits? Standard repair, you're changing out your ceiling fan, no problem. If you add a whole new, the room never had anything and you're putting it in, that's an extension of a circuit that should have a permit. If it's just one, we're probably not going to have a problem. What we run into It's usually 5 or 6 different ones, all different through the house. Kitchen changeouts are a big one. If you're just changing the cabinets for a new look on the cabinet and you're not moving or reorganizing the way things are set up, that's not something we really want to get involved in. If you're relocating the sink, doing other work, one of the scenarios, the reasons we do want you at that point to get a permit is a lot of the houses built in the 70s only have one set of circuit to feed all the outlets in your kitchen. You're probably, causing problems and breakers popping and stuff. They aren't GFCI protected. If they are, it's probably not right because there's a specific wiring method that needs to go with that device. So we kind of like get a permit, go ahead and add this, make it so you have the code compliant 2 circuits, that they're GFCI protected, they're in the right location. There was a meme recently going around, and the picture, the statement was, any builder knows that you don't use an ivory cover with a white receptacle. So the receptacle was white, the cover was ivory. The problem was it was in the sink. It was literally cut into the sink and put there. So we run into stuff like that, overloading circuits and things like that. So there's kind of so that's one.
Hey Dave, do you want to talk about the commercial thing in Arizona, about commercial versus owner builder? And if it's a commercial, touch on that too. And a lot of people don't think because they're a building owner, they don't need permits or they don't need contractors or.
Right. I know I didn't get to a long list. There's some stuff on HVAC when it doesn't need it. Plumbing fixtures, if you're getting in and changing stuff under the floor, you probably need a permit for your, if you have drains that are broken or whatever. So that list is available online, and it's also in if you go into the codes, the city code, our building administrative code is about 80 pages long, and there's a section work exempt from permits. And we tried to be specific. There's some standard language in the building code that's kind of very generic. Oil derricks don't need a permit. We didn't need that one, so we didn't worry about that one. So we tried to also kind of set parameters so it's easier for people, okay, that's why I need it or don't need it. Commercial, one of the struggles with commercial, there's 2, 3, if you count the ADA. State law for when an engineer and an architect, registered design professional is required, states that if you're doing work, building or remodeling a space that has a square footage of 3,000 or more, or if it can have 20 or more people in it, or if any single structural element is over 40 feet. Those are the 3 triggers or rules that say, okay, if it doesn't have any of these, anybody can draw the plans. So most of your small mom and pop kitchens or restaurants usually can handle more than 20 people, even though they're not 3,000 square feet, but it's an or. So we run into a lot of cases where people are doing work. One of them was Habby's. I don't know if anybody, the game thing that came for a couple weeks or whatever. The issue there wasn't necessarily the people, although they did want a lot of people. It's part of a strip mall. And that code reads that a building, 3,000 square feet. So the building code defines buildings, defines when buildings are 2 and stuff. So there's like a firewall that you can put in and create buildings. So they had to get a design professional for all the remodeling they were doing because they were part of that strip mall. And that trips up a lot of people. People doing yogurt shops and stuff like that, going into a tenant space, don't realize that, okay, I'm putting Fresh Press, the guy there who was great to work with, didn't realize he needed, it was a Subway. Well, he was putting a hood in and some other stuff, and that stuff needed to have a permit. We've struggled. We have a lot of older restaurants here that have hoods that are, some of them just flat put in wrong. Some of them have been not maintained correctly. We've had places where people cut holes in them and now they don't work like they're supposed to. So we've dealt with a lot of that. We go in on inspections for liquor licenses and stuff, and we find out that fish fries were great. We added a fish fryer. Well, that means that the 6-burner stove now is sticking 2 feet out from under the hood, which means it doesn't work. So we've run into some scenarios like that. So the threshold for, the other thing is that there is an owner-builder option under state law under the contractor license. So Arizona has state contracting licenses, and they, the whole home castle thing, they put a provision in that says if you are going to own and occupy a residence or building for at least a year after whatever time you get the permit, you don't have to go get a licensed contractor to do the work. That doesn't apply to commercial. We also don't believe it applies to anybody that the property is owned by an LLC, or we have trouble with trust and stuff like that. So that's another one. We've got renters. Oh, I'm going to fix up the house. And now it's like, but you can't do the work because it's a rental. You don't own it. So that's one we struggle with getting people to understand. There was a time when that kind of created the other issue that we have a lot of unpermitted additions, enclosed, somebody took a porch and added walls and now it's, living space. State law does say that we can't make somebody that buys something new or is the new owner and goes to do something, if we discover, which we do a lot of times, we're looking at we have GIS, so we're looking at the overhead aerial, and we realize, well, that wasn't there 2 years ago or 5 years ago, and we don't have a permit for it. Well, state law says we can't make the new owner go and get a permit for something that was there when they bought it. It still has to meet zoning, and it still has to be safe. So in a lot of cases, let's say it's a garage, it was a carport, they enclosed it into a garage, then it became the bedroom. We'll make sure that they have smoke detectors. We'll make sure that they have an emergency, that the window meets the requirement for emergency egress, but we won't necessarily make them get a permit or that. But when it usually happens is they're doing something else. Oh, I want to add onto the back of the house, but somebody already did something wrong on the front. So we deal with those scenarios. We get tons of calls from realtors. Is this, was there a permit issued for this new kitchen or, new whatever? And we're like, well, no, we don't see anything. So that can be problematic on a sale. What usually happens is the buyer uses that knowledge to say, well, you got a problem and I'm buying it. I'll give you, 10,000 less. You've lost value now because you didn't do something maybe the right way. So we do deal with that quite a bit. Does that trigger any other questions?
If I bought a house and I want to see the history of what's been done and pull for permits, can I go online and pull that, or do I have to go through your office?
So we are just now in 2021 moving from a system that was put into place in 2000. So we have an old, it's a pre-SQL or early SQL database that's not available online. It wasn't designed for that originally. We have been trying to get all that information moved over, but it needs clean. We got to get it cleaned up and then figure out a way to put it. We would like to make that available. Some of it because we inherited stuff from the county and some county information, it's really poor. I mean, we have stuff that says electrical. It might have the address and says electrical, doesn't give you any dollar amount. Some of them you can kind of figure out, okay, well, they paid $1,200, that probably was a service change. But a lot of it, the information, older information is just not very reliable. But we use that ourselves to figure out what's going on. The data from 2000 on is a little bit better, but it's, there's a lot of cases a permit got issued, nobody went back and did inspections. So it's kind of, well, what happened, so that. We're using now an online system that we're working with another government agency that built this in 2007, 2008 after Katrina in Louisiana. So it's a government agency created it for themselves and it was really good, so they started to share it. Very reasonable. We have no seat licenses. We pay a monthly fee based on our permit volume. So you know, and we're getting up and going with that. I think everybody likes it. We've been told that it's an easier system for the users to use from outside than like Mesa's, which is $1 million plus system, and some others. So we're excited about that. It helps us. You know, we're hoping eventually to do more camera inspections, video inspections, things like that are coming, and COVID has, you know, a lot of cities have done stuff. Our inspector's been real good. He's just kept going straight ahead, going out, meeting everybody and doing the inspections. And so we've kept our, you know, stuff going even under what's going on. So, but we do look forward to having a few more bodies to help us share the load.
So this, what's up on the screen now is this My Government Online, which is My Permit Now. So it's hard to see, but there's 3 different modules. One for building permits. One is that for code compliance called the Solution Center. So if you have a code complaint, and maybe that's part of the answer to the question, if people are starting to use this, you can go in and log a complaint against someone anonymously. You can upload a photo. If there's, you know, 10 cars in the front yard with no tires, no wheels, whatever, that's the Solution Center, and then we respond to those. Victor will get those in a minute. And then the last one is planning and zoning, is we're trying to take our applications for new developments all online. Everything's electronic. So we were about to build more shelf space in one of our storage rooms to bring plans in. Someone picks them up, takes them out, review them. Everything's online. We said, I guess we don't need that shelf anymore. So 95% of the stuff, probably it's getting to be 100 now, is coming in electronically. We have 2 weeks ago, installed a kiosk in the lobby with a scanner, so you can bring your plans in, you can scan them, you can create your account and get your plans reviewed. You can track your permit status, you can track your code case status, you can track your, where is my conditional use permit, when is it going to go to the P&Z, all online now, and very reasonable. So hats off to Dave. Somebody just sent me an email about, I forget what it was, Phoenix has a Acela. I mean, these are $1 million systems that the old software was called Tidemark. It got bought out by Acela, and then they quit supporting it. So we've been on kind of this legacy system. We're paying for it every year, but not getting any upgrades, not getting any support. And so this is like, if you're familiar, like Tess, if you know CAG and MAG, this is an area association of governments in Louisiana. They came up with this, and now they have 300 cities and counties. It's another governmental entity. It's an intergovernmental agreement we have, very reasonable, and I think it's looks like it's doing as good or not better than $1 million system. So I think Darren at the sewer district is using it, and there was one other city out here that was thinking about using it, but they haven't moved forward. So it's still a work in progress. We're just kind of getting up and running on it, but it's working out.
Yeah. It offers a lot more transparency because you set up your own portal. You actually get to view a lot of the information. There's like, if we say that a particular permit is going to have 5 items before it gets issued, you get to see them as they're completed. You know, so you kind of have a feel. You can enter your inspections that way. You can see the results. Eventually, we'll be able to, you know, builders give us all their subcontractors. It will email the results directly to the subcontractors. So we're getting there. It offers a lot. I think it's helping us manage, you know, a bigger caseload. But I think the promise is there for a lot more. So great to see everybody here. Thank you for what you do for the city, and hopefully you get a lot more knowledge as we go on.
All right, so Victor is going to be next. And he's got a slideshow and a movie trailer that I think Al promised everybody, so we're going to show the movie trailer. Trying to go through these. So
No, I'm supposed to turn this off.
do you want to, how do you want to do it? can advance the slides that way. I'm just gonna bring up the other. We'll do the trailer and then a break. Okay. I should let Victor. You want to launch the trailer, or you want to introduce yourself, launch the trailer? Something we had fun with.
So, my name is Victor. I pretty much just asked me what city I haven't worked for in Maricopa and Pinal County, and that's probably a lot easier than telling you where I worked, right? So I started with Phoenix, moved my way around to Gilbert. Started with Phoenix, moved to Gilbert, worked in Mesa, worked in Avondale. Where else have I worked? Queen Creek, Apache Junction. So
You've been fired like 8 times. Is that what you're saying?
those are the only ones I'm telling you about. There's more than that, but so I got about 20 plus years of experience in doing code compliance. So this is where I'm at. Apache Junction decided, okay, let's get Victor over, see if he can actually stay here. We'll see how that goes. I've been here 4 months now, so I think that's a record. So we'll see if we can break it. So here's the trailer. Oh yeah, I call my mom. I get reminded of her every day. All right, I guess you can
Al, you want to
now.
take a 5-minute break or now, or when Victor's done? You guys okay with a 5-minute break? Look at that big advance, and then Victor's gonna have to relax.
in the morning, because in the morning it's just cold. You know, I'm a Phoenix native. Born and raised in Phoenix, anything's cold to me. So I'm coming in the morning, it's 40 degrees, I'm freezing. All right, let's get going here with the Code Compliance Division. So Code Compliance Division, a quick overview. We pretty much work in partnership with residents, businesses, because we want to preserve and enhance the safety and appearance of our community, right? Pretty much we want your neighborhood to look pretty and clean and enjoyable. Code compliance, before and after, so that's what we do. We kind of, our goal is to help reduce the blight. We want to, encourage an attractive, safe, and desirable community. We want your children to go out there and play and enjoy while they're out there and playing. Your property values to be up. So that's the reason for code compliance. So to accomplish this goal, we administer a fair and equitable program emphasizing voluntary compliance with city codes. Pretty much what it says is we go up to you and hope that you will correct the violation without us having to do any further enforcement, right? That is the dream of code compliance. Does that happen? Probably not, but most of the time it does. So why a code compliance program? Well, maintain a safe and healthy neighborhood, like I was saying. You want your family to enjoy the neighborhood. You want to, reduce a lot of the criminal activity. You want to preserve property values. You don't want your children to have to be inside the house real early because they don't feel safe out there. We want your house or the community to pretty much have a good aesthetics. We don't want it to be run down. We don't want it to deteriorate. So we're pretty much, kind of being proactive to make sure that they're keeping up with the neighborhood, with the community. Of course, like I said before, to protect property values, not only of the residential neighborhoods, but also of the business community, and reduce vandalism and deter crime. Also, code compliance, I believe, has a big effect on the economic development perspective. If a big builder or a big organization is going to come in here and look at Apache Junction, and they drive through our main corridor, and the first thing they see is a lot of blight, a lot of debris, a lot of signage out there that just makes it look pretty bad, then you're not going to want to come and put your business in here. But, if you keep the city clean, then, that's going to create jobs because more businesses are going to want to come in here. And, we want to establish a framework for community involvement to resolve public nuisance. So pretty much, we want to work with the community. We want you guys to be involved, to help us, to be our ears and eyes, as they say, to help us understand where most of the violations are at. For us, what I tell people is it's just 3 code officers and me as a manager. That's not enough labor for us to be out there driving through every single residential street. So most of the time we're going to be driving out to what's known as, the arterial streets, the main streets. So with your help is what we know what's actually going on inside the neighborhoods. So the code compliance goal is to encourage both residential and commercial property owners, like I said, to voluntarily resolve code compliance violations on their properties, and to ensure that Apache Junction remains a community that is clean and a safe place to live, work, and play. So how do you report a violation? You can do it in person. Come in to this same building here, just right around the corner there. That's 300 East Superstition Boulevard, Building D. As soon as you walk in, there should be some papers there that you can fill out to report a violation. Or if you just want to see my pretty face, you can ask for Victor, and I'll take your complaint. You can call the code compliance hotline. That's actually the person who answers there right there, believe it or not. No, I'm just playing. I don't even know who answers the phone, but you leave a voicemail, and then I'll take your message the same business day or the next business day and open the case. In writing to the same address I just told you, send a U.S. mail. Or you can email me at code@apachejunction.ac.gov. You want to submit a complaint, you want to say hi, whatever it is, just email me there, and I usually get those emails. And the other way to do it is go to MyGovOnline. So mygovernmentonline.com, is it? .org, there you go. Shows you how much I go into it, right? It's already in my bookmarks. But you go on there, right there, you're gonna see right in the middle there, you have those 4 blue tabs there on the top, right in the middle is Solution Center. Once you click on Solution Center, right here, let me see if I can do this real quick. Look at that, might work. So you can go to Solution Center, you're gonna submit a request, right? And then you're gonna come to this screen right here. You're gonna select the state, which in this case is gonna be Arizona. The jurisdiction is gonna be Apache Junction, right? And then Solution Center, which is, code compliance. Hit next. Right here, it's gonna ask you to create an account. If you're gonna submit a complaint, you don't need to create an account if you don't want to. Now, if you're gonna submit plans and that kind of stuff, then you will need to create an account. So in this case, you can just say proceed anonymously. Right here, you're gonna enter the address, just to kind of show you guys, 300 E Supers. The city, Apache Junction, the zip code, what is it, 85119. Hit next. And then you just enter your name if you want to. You don't have to enter anything here. You can just hit next. Right here, you're gonna, what kind of violation is it? Working without a permit, cargo containers, debris, illegal signage, inoperable vehicles, storage, property maintenance, recreational vehicles, the zoning violation or fencing, just whatever violation it is. Right here, you're gonna describe the violation. Like you can say it's an inoperable blue car that has flat tires, or there's weeds that are, 5 feet tall, whatever it is that you want to write. That's where you're gonna write it right there. Hit next. And you want to upload pictures. This is where you can do it. Upload pictures. If you haven't, if you don't, just hit next. And then right here, this is where you just hit submit. And once you hit submit, I'll get an email that says, hey, there's a complaint that has been submitted. I'll review the complaint. If I can validate the address, then I'll assign it to the code officer assigned to that area. And they will go out there and take a look at the case and figure out if they want to proceed or not, based if it's a violation or not. So also, you can always go to the code compliance website on the AGCD, so agcd.net. Now that I'm already on the internet, might as well enjoy it here. Go to government, development services, go to code compliance division. You're gonna see the nice pretty little picture there. You see that? That's a good looking guy right there. And then to report a code violation, you click here, and that'll take you straight to the website I was just at. You want to send an email, it's code@agcd.net or Apache Junction, ac.gov. Here you can see like a boundary map. You want to go in there. You can see who the code compliance officer is in a certain area. A lot of different little things here that you can actually go through if you really wanted to. So that's how you report a complaint via the MyGov Online. So how are code violations enforced? So pretty much we get a complaint. I assign it to a code officer. The code officer goes out there, takes pictures while they're out there, verifies the complaint is there. If it is, then they'll issue what's known either as a courtesy notice or a notice of violation. Those notices are depending if it's a zoning violation, we have to issue one for 21 days. If it's a nuisance violation, it's for 10 days actually. But there are situations where there are imminent hazard type of situations. Those ones we take care of immediately. We try to get those done right away. Usually cases are done in the order they are received, except for imminent hazard situations. Those ones are done. We kind of drop everything and go there because ultimately we don't want to risk the life of anybody. So that's pretty much where I went to. Courtesy notice, notice of violation. So if the correction is not made in a reasonable amount of time, so an individual may be subject to further enforcement action. So what that means is the code calls for, usually we'll do what's known as they used to call it friendly letters, but I call them courtesy notices. If it's a zoning, it's 21 days. If it's a property maintenance, it's 10 days. We go out there, property is still in violation, we'll issue a notice of violation, same time period, another 21 days or another 10 days. After we go out there that time, it's a straight civil citation. We are no longer going to work with people and tell them, okay, we're going to give you 3-4 months to correct the violation. We're not going to do that anymore. It's okay, you already had sufficient time. So if we gave you 121 day and then an additional 21 days, you're already looking at what, 42 days? That's already a long time for your neighbor to have a lot of smelly trash that you're smelling every day, right? So The question was, well, you guys are issuing a lot of citations. That's why, because we are now getting more stricter with the times. You know, if it's 20 days or if it's a 42 days, after that we get no response from anybody, then we're going to issue a citation. We are no longer going to spend all that time trying to look for someone to let them know, hey, you have a violation on your property, because that takes a lot of time and effort from us, especially now when we're getting a lot more complaints coming in, a lot more activity in the city. I know in the past that's probably what they were doing, trying to find information to get a hold of these property owners, but unfortunately now we don't have the time to be doing that. So how do we enforce property maintenance standards? It's based on Chapter 9 of the City of Apache Junction City Code. So some of the Chapter 9 violations that we have is, you know, you need to have your garbage in a container that prevents leakage, prevents access from animals, rodents, insects, and is washable. Bag or loose garbage should not be stored for more than 24 hours outside of an enclosed building or approved receptacle. No inoperable vehicles, pretty much if the vehicle is not licensed, has flat tires, is missing anything to make it a lawfully operable vehicle on a public street is considered inoperable. So in order for it to be operable, you need to lawfully drive it on the street, meaning it needs to have the tires, the headlights, insurance, properly registered. So minor vehicle repair, I mean, you can do repairs on your vehicle, on your property, and you're okay with that. So let's say you have your hood up, the vehicle is not inoperable, I'm doing repairs on it, that's fine, we understand that. So you're allowed to do repairs on your vehicle. Maintenance in weeds, we go 10 inches. If your weeds are over 10 inches in height, you're in violation. So if you see me out there with a pen, that means I'm measuring your weeds, because a pen is going to be 6 inches. So if I have to put a pen on top of another one, you're in violation immediately. So that's what I do to measure. There's no trick. If you don't believe me, get a ruler out and measure your pen, 6 inches. Right? So also we do that with sidewalks and public places. So if you have an alley, same thing. You're responsible for maintaining the alley. Half of the alley, property line to property line of 10 inches. Or if I go to your property and you have a lot of dead vegetation, even if it's not over 10 inches in height, but it's dead, it's still creating a blight interference, so I can still issue you a notice for that. Pools, just make sure your water is not left stagnant. Make sure it's treated. We don't want any algae growth on it. We don't want it to be green. We don't want it to breed mosquitoes, that kind of stuff. So that's pretty much what it comes down to the pools. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. On the exterior, just make sure that the siding, stucco, brick, stone, wood, all the exterior part, windows, doors, everything is kept structurally sound and impervious to moisture and weather elements. What does that mean? Make sure it's in good repair, make sure it's painted. Because if something is not painted, it's not going to be impervious to the moisture elements, meaning the sun is going to warp it, or if it rains. So that's what we say. We want to paint it. We want it to be in good structural shape, in good condition. That includes the fences and any exterior part of the property. So all buildings, structures, accessory structures, detached garages, same thing. Just make sure they're in good condition, good repair. Make sure that you're gonna erect any garage, any accessory structures, that you get the proper permits. Because a lot of people don't. They just say, okay, let me put up a garage and don't get a permit, right? So just make sure you get your proper permits. Sleeping or living in an accessory structure is a violation. So a lot of people like to do that, sleep in accessory structures. So you need to have an address on your property. Numbers shall contrast with the background. Should be Arabic numerals and alphabetic letters, and it should be not less than 4 inches in height with a minimum stroke width of 0.5 inches. Pretty much what I tell people, I'm not going to go out there and measure it. If I can read it, I'm okay. All right. Recreational vehicles, you're allowed to have one unoccupied RV in a residential zoning district in the side or rear yard behind the front facade of the residence or in a completely enclosed garage. One unoccupied RV. That means you cannot live in it. You cannot sleep in it. All right. A lot of people says, well, you're allowed to have one RV. That's why I sleep in it. No, unoccupied. Can't live in it. So the process is notice of violation. Then we go to civil or criminal citation. Just so you know, here in the city of Apache Junction, all zoning violations are considered a criminal offense. So that means that if you don't comply with a zoning violation order, that we're going to send your your information to court to have you long form and be issue a criminal misdemeanor. So you're gonna have to appear in court, and if you don't, you get a warrant for your arrest. Nuisance violations, which is a Chapter 9, are civil. That means you're just gonna get a fine, whether it's $350 up to $2,500. That's what the state allows. And it's just based on whether it's been the first citation, second, or third within a 24-month period, or how severe the violation is. And all our cases are heard in municipal court. So we don't have an administrative process here. It's all municipal court. Yes. No, they're not certified peace officers. Well, many of us probably were in the past because we were in the field, but not in this current job. We're not.
So the question was, right, Al?
The question was, are code enforcement officers certified peace officers? For people who don't understand what peace officers are, he's asking if they're certified law enforcement officers. And we are not. Many of us have worked in the industry before. We were police officers in the past, and we probably have our certifications, but not for this job. Yes?
What happens if somebody doesn't have the money to do it? Do you have somebody that you can refer them to help get that stuff off their property? So I know we have like the Friends of AJ, but do we have other groups like that that can help or not?
Correct. There's a lot of different groups or a lot of different ways that we can help people that really don't have the money. But that we'll assess those on a one-to-one basis once we're there, because there's a lot of people out there, believe it or not, who have the money, they just don't want to do it. But we work with the people. We kind of figure out who needs the help, and we provide assistance to them. In fact, sometimes I get my director out there on a Saturday and get him to work.
What?
Yeah.
No, I think the Friends of AJ, yeah, they took 9 tons off a property. I think that is about 4 or 5 of those 40-yard dumpsters. About a month ago, that was a code case that Donna referred to the Friends of AJ, to Fox Young, and they got, through Just Serve, got about 20 kids over there, and Donna herself was over there cleaning up the yard. So I think did he already show that slideshow at the council meeting? Did I miss that one? Yeah, I think it's incredible what they did. If you saw that slideshow of how much trash they took out in the before and after. So another thing that has happened a few times where it's unfortunate, but sometimes in this community we have elderly folks, then they don't have relatives. They pass away, and we've had many cases where there doesn't seem to be an owner, where they don't have a niece, a nephew, a child. And so Kimberly was working, and Rick too, I think 3 or 4 or 5 cases where there didn't appear to be an owner. And then someone comes in, pays the property, the old back taxes, gets the tax certificates, and then Kimberly was on them, and we had a couple buildings demolished through code enforcement because the ownership eventually changed hands. But those can end up being nuisance properties where vagrants will go in and live in them, and so we've had cases like that. So there's a lot of different aspects to code enforcement that we cover the gamut.
Yeah, so pretty much what I've been doing lately now too is we have a lot of properties that are vacant, that are probably going through the foreclosure process or whatever it is. So now we're doing what's known as abatements. So what we do, the city will issue the proper notification as required by the state of Arizona. If the property doesn't get cleaned up, then we'll do what's known as an administrative abatement. Have contractors go out there, clean up the property, then we'll lien the property for whatever that amount is. Also, we can do court order abatements. So meaning if a property is occupied and the property owner refuses to clean up the property, I can get a court order or seek a court order to be able to clean up the property. I'll get my contractors out there. The contractors will clean it up, and then we'll lien the property for whatever that amount is. And once I get a court order, that means that the property owner cannot obstruct with us, because otherwise they'll be interfering with a judicial proceeding. So that's how that process works.
Okay, I have a question from our online folks. The question is there any policy to address repeated unsubstantiated complaints, what they refer to as kind of frivolous complaints, or ones that do not end up as code cases?
Correct. So we currently don't have an internal administrative process in place, but what I tell my code officers and what I have followed in the past is if we receive 3 complaints within the last couple of months on a property and they have not been substantiated, then at that point we will require complainant information. Who is the complainant? Because a lot of times, you can submit the complaint anonymous and we won't find out who you are. But after a 3rd time, then I probably wouldn't even assign that case to anyone unless I have complainant information and they can provide me with more information on the complaint that they're making. Because like I said, I will get all the complaints myself, and then I'll assign it to whoever the code officer is. and that way I can review them also. So every time I put in a complaint on the system's automatically going to let me know how many cases we had in the past, and that can kind of trigger for me, okay, we had 3 open cases just this past year, what's going on, and that's how I can look at them. Yes? Yes?
If you've been following on social media, this argument about the discussion, they've been having a lot of discussions about code compliance. And there seems to be an argument that if it's in your backyard and it's not creating a health hazard, like vermin or bugs or anything, that there shouldn't, you shouldn't have the right to go back there and mess with it. What's the official position on that? If it's in, let's say for instance, if I have an old parked car in my backyard, you can't see it from the street, but it's in my backyard, where does that go? Where do you guys fall into that?
So, okay, so we follow all federal and state laws, meaning you have your expectation of privacy. That's a federal law. So we're not going to violate your expectation of privacy. So if it's behind your front yard, it's in the backyard, and you have it properly screened, and by what I mean properly screened, it's probably like a block fence or something where I can't look through it, then you'll be okay. Now, what I tell people also is, because a lot of people have a lot of stuff in their backyards, and what do? They say, okay, I'm going to have my whole backyard just full of stuff to probably 4 feet tall, right? Because you won't be able to look at it. Well, I'm short. You know, I'm 5'7", but I might have a code officer who's 6'2", and guess what? He can look over that 6-foot fence and not violate your expectation of privacy.
But also to that is that if your neighbor, so what if it's not a block wall, but maybe you have a block wall or wood fence in your front along the street, but between you and your neighbor, it's a chain link fence and the neighbor is tired of seeing it, then we can write that up. Or if there's an alley and we can run down the alley and it's a chain link fence and we can see in the alley through the chain link fence, then obviously, but we're not, we get accused all the time of standing on the top of the pickup truck and, or standing on a chair and looking over the fence. We don't do that.
That was another thing the next question was on some of these discussions we've had on social media. You guys have been accused of literally standing on a ladder looking over a fence to look for compliance issues.
Yeah, I don't even think we carry ladders in our trucks.
Yeah.
No, we don't even have ladders. I asked Larry if I can buy some. He said no, so. Doesn't.
Wouldn't that where the photos will come into play in the sense of if there is a code that needs to be looked at, a photo?
Correct. So once we go to a civil hearing, we have to present the evidence that we have against you. So that's where the photos are going to come into play, and that's where you can question all the evidence that we have, and and create your case. So yeah, and what I tell people is, you can always ask for a public records request and get a copy of the entire file. Yeah.
Now the cameras we have are like 12 megapixels. I mean, they're good cameras. They're not expensive, but they're good, and so they've not been thrown out in court, and they have zoom lenses on them. But again, it's like a police officer. They're not police officers, but they have discretion. And we try to work with people, so it's not a gotcha situation. I don't know, Victor, what's the percentage of cases that are proactive versus reactive or complaint-based? But once we get there and we get a complaint and we see a dilapidated car in one yard and there's one next door, we don't have blinders on and say, oh, we're not going to write that up. It's fair and equal across the board. Everybody that we're there, we see another violation, we write that one up too.
Yeah,
And
so
sometimes it's the complainant.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden they're mad at their neighbor, we write up the neighbor, we're there, and then the complainant's mad because they are violating themselves. So, again, we have to treat everybody fair, we have to follow the U.S. Constitution, state law, that's what we do, plain and simple.
Yeah, and what I tell people is, so if you want to complain on your neighbor because they have an inoperable vehicle, but guess what, they also have debris, a lot of times I get the person telling me, wow, I only complain about their inoperable vehicle, why you pick everything else up? Well, because we're going to pick up every violation we can find on that property. We're just not going to go there for the inoperable vehicle. So, yes?
So, the city operates Monday through Friday, or Monday through Thursday. Do you have other compliance officers working Friday, Saturday, and Sunday?
I don't have compliance officers working Fridays and Sundays, but if there's an issue that needs to be dealt with on the weekend, guess what? I'm driving out here on the weekend to deal with that issue, or I'm going to have a police officer do it for me on the Friday, Saturday, or Sunday.
Because one of the things that's kind of an unwritten rule, if you want to do construction or any kind of
Yeah, correct. And you can, but you got to remember,
Basically, you guys, have, two people doing Monday through Thursday, and one person doing Tuesday through Sunday, like switch.
yeah, but you got to remember, so I'm working a lot with the police department now, and I'm training them on the city codes and what to look for when they're out there. And now I'm getting calls from the police department telling me, hey, we got violations here, we got violations there. I get emails from them now saying this is what we saw, and it's becoming they're becoming more active out there in the neighborhood now. So if they see issues while they're driving out there or while they're answering to calls, they're definitely going to send them to us, and we're going to deal with them on Monday. Yes.
If a neighbor, or let's say a neighbor, goes online and sends in a complaint, okay, and you go there, now they've got a concrete block wall around the yard. You can't see in there. Do you go knock on their door at all or anything and talk to them, or do you just drive away and say, we can't smell or see anything, so there's nothing to check because of their expectation of privacy?
Well, correct. We can't find a violation, then me personally, I'm not going to bother that individual. But if I can kind of see something, a violation, I personally, and I expect my code officers, once this whole COVID-19 is done, that you're going to make contact with every single resident that you get a code complaint from. Because you want to make contact with them, you want to let them know what the complaint was, you want to let them know what the violation is, and let them know that they're going to be receiving a letter in the mail, so they're already kind of aware of what's going on. That is my expectation as a manager, that you make contact with everyone that you go out there and visit. But like I said, we're not going to violate your expectation of privacy. That's a federal law, and the last thing we're going to do is violate your rights.
I get a microphone. So do you follow any of the social media pages in town and any of the stuff there to look for violations or any of that stuff? Does anybody monitor those?
I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have social media accounts whatsoever. So if you're looking for me, you're not going to find me, because I don't have Facebook, I don't have Twitter or none of that stuff. But my code officers do. They're involved in the social media, so if something comes up, they immediately let us know if there's going to be an issue. I know my director also has social media, and if something comes up, he'll definitely let me know.
I do not have social media. I do not, I'm antisocial.
Oh, there you go.
So, but what happens is other people on social media will take a screenshot and email it to us. So there could be, they see something, they'll do it that way. I kind of detest social media, so I don't even get involved in social media.
Yeah, I
But
don't have social media.
if there is sometimes we use that, like we have a lot of zoning violations that are home businesses that aren't supposed to be there. So sometimes people will say they don't have a business license. Well, they don't have a business license, they don't have a business, but yet they have a Facebook account that names their business and kind of advertises on it, or they'll have a web page. And so sometimes we use social media as we're going to court or part of an investigative process to say, yeah, I really think that there is a business there. That is a auto repair or a towing company or something that's not supposed to be there. So, but the other code officers, they do more social media, and if they see something, then they'll use it to the extent that it makes sense, I guess.
All right, any other questions? No? If anybody wants my business card, let me know, and I'll give it to you, just so you have it. And otherwise, if you don't have any more questions, I'm going to go home and have dinner at 9 p.m., whatever time it is. I was expecting Al to have something here for us, but didn't work out. Thank you. Well, I eat anything. As long as it doesn't have onions, I'm fair game.
Okay, so we're getting close to wrapping up here, and thank you again for all your great questions, wonderful questions. Again, like I said, I view code compliance, code enforcement, whatever you want to call it, as it's another revitalization tool that we have for the community. And I think we have been asked by the council, by the city manager, to take code compliance seriously, take a systematic approach. I think that's what Victor has done here. I think that's what My Government Online is going to do for us, that we have, we're not closing cases out as soon as we used to. So people, there's probably a good perception that things are ramping up, but I think folks that have lived here for 30 years or worked here, I think they do see changes in the community over time. Again, I think we're trying to be fair and friendly, but at some point, folks have to help themselves. And we do try to find, social networks to find help for people, like I said, through the friends or church groups or neighborhood cleanups or whatever. So, okay, so finally, we're going to talk about the long-range plan. And we didn't practice this, Rudy, so I don't know if you want to talk about the general plan, and then we may want to talk about the state land for a few minutes, so we can throw up an aerial of Google Earth and kind of tell you about that. I did just bring this with me, Rudy, if you want to. You've been around for, I don't know, 3 general plans, maybe 4? 3 or 4. Yeah, so that's.
Hi, my name is Rudy Esquivias. I am the planning manager. Like Larry said a little bit ago, I've been here for going on 32 years. Graduated from ASU in 1989. Apache Junction was my first job, and I'm still here. So I've seen a lot of change in the community, see a lot of growth in the community from the days when all we did was land splits for mobile homes, and we didn't have a sewer system, of course, to the nice housing developments you see going in now, which really started coming in around the mid-90s or so. There were a couple of established subdivisions in town, Apache Villa, Palm Springs, that were built back in the 50s and the 60s, but we really didn't start seeing some of the more contemporary type of growth until about the mid-90s. There are several documents that we use in the planning division. Our general plan is probably one of our main guiding documents. It is not an ordinance. It is not a law book. It is a policy manual. It's a guidance manual of, what do we want to be when we grow up? And under state law, every 10 years or so, cities are supposed to either readopt their existing general plan or draft a new general plan. Obviously, the plan before this one was our 2010 general plan. It needed some updating. You need to update the numbers. You need to update the population statistics, the growth that has been reflected in the community. So every 10 years is about a pretty good time to update your general plan. This last time around, we did it in-house, which was, not often done. A lot of times cities will hire consultants to do it, but when you do that, a lot of times you get this off-the-shelf kind of thing where they just change the name of the city, but, it reads like 20 or 30 other cities' general plans. This 2020 to 2050 general plan is uniquely AJ. It was done with a lot of stakeholders in the community, with city staff, with our partners in the community, like the fire department, the police department, the water companies, the sewer companies. So it's a good plan. It's reflective of the community, kind of shows the direction where we want to go in. And this, like I said, is the policy document that we use to guide land use decisions in the city. Even though it's not necessarily a regulatory document, your zoning decisions should follow what your general plan has called out for an area. The thing that probably impacts people the most is the land use element of the plan. These are the parts of the city that are going to be commercial. These are the parts of the city that are going to be low residential, multifamily, industrial, business park, open space. So when a developer comes along and they say, you know what, I want to do a commercial development in an area that's mostly residential. Well, what does the general plan say about that? There's discussion in the general plan that talks about major and minor amendments. Now, we're a relatively small community, so if somebody's proposing to do 10 acres or more, for example, in an area that's designated residential, but they want to do a commercial project, it's 10 acres or more, that's what's called a major general plan amendment. And under state law, major general plan amendments are only processed once a year. You have all of your general plan major amendments done at one public hearing during the year. So that means that if somebody wants a major amendment of the plan, they need to start early, probably around March or April, because our general plan meetings, I think, are designated for September. And typically a general plan amendment process is at least a 6-month process. If you've got less than 10 acres, then it's a zoning issue. But it's still subject to a planning and zoning commission and a city council decision. Just because a person applies for a rezoning or a certain type of development, by the time we get through the process, it does not necessarily mean it's going to be approved. It means that the planning and zoning commission and our city council will evaluate all the factors that are related to a particular land use request, hear from the neighbors, hear from the developers, hear from staff, hear from other interested stakeholders, and make their decision based on the information gathered and what the general plan says, what the neighborhood looks like, what the character is, and how it fits into the community. And some of those decisions are unpopular, some of those decisions are popular, but it's a balancing act that our city council tries to follow and our P&Z commission tries to follow. And once again, the plan is the guiding document. So Larry mentioned a little bit ago, we use our general plan to kind of guide the process. We also have a zoning ordinance, which is more of a regulatory document. You know, if you're in a GR district, how far do your setbacks have to be from property lines? How tall can your building be? How much lot coverage can you have? And of course, the smaller zoning district, the smaller the setback, the less the lot coverage, or you know, the varying building heights. Commercial zones, of course, are different. So the zoning ordinance is more of a, you know, step-by-step, district-by-district document which outlines what can be done in a particular district, not only the bulk requirements, but also what uses are allowed in particular zoning districts. And then we have these things that are called conditional use permits, where it's a use that may be allowed in a particular zoning district, but because of special characteristics or special effects that it may have in a neighborhood, it may need a special permit, and that's what we call a conditional use permit. For example, these marijuana dispensaries, they came along back around 10 years ago or so, and generally allowed in commercial zones, or unless you're going to be a manufacturing or cultivation facility, then you might need to be in an industrial type area. But we didn't know what kind of impacts they were going to have on neighborhoods. Certainly very controversial type uses. So we put our medical marijuana uses under a conditional use permit process. There should be some kind of public overview. There should be some public input, some neighborhood input. And so those types of businesses are required to go through a conditional use permit process. We didn't make it too onerous. We didn't require rezoning. But our CUPs go to Planning and Zoning Commission. If nobody protests the Planning and Zoning Commission or challenges it within 20 days, and that decision stands. If somebody does put up the money and gives us the reasons and challenges whatever decision, whether it's a dispensary or something else, then it goes on to City Council for final decision. All rezonings go through a Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation, City Council final decision. General plan amendments, Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation, City Council decision. Subdivision plats go to Planning and Zoning Commission for a recommendation, City Council decision, with the exception of the final plat, which goes to the council only. So there's a whole bunch of different types of cases we handle. Larry mentioned Board of Adjustment, rezonings, zoning ordinance text amendments, general plan text amendments, conditional use permits, subdivision plats. There's a lot of things we do administratively, like land splits, minor land splits. If you've got 5 acres and you want to create 3 lots out of it, there's a little survey process that you go through to do your land split. Make sure you're meeting the minimum zoning requirements, that you get proper and correct legal descriptions drawn up to help you facilitate your land split. So those are the types of things that the planning division handles. But you know, the thing that I enjoy most about being a planner is you get to bring a lot of people together, folks that are involved in the development process. We coordinate very closely with our engineers, with our water districts, with our folks, with our friends at the sewer district, with our friends at the fire department, with our friends at PD, with our friends upstairs in management. You know, planning kind of brings a lot of things together to help and solicits input from all of these different agencies, all of these different disciplines and professions, to try and put together the best land use decisions possible, make the best recommendations possible on any given particular development project or text code change, whatever the case may be. And some things, you never know what issue is going to bring out the passions of the community. Sometimes we get cases that we think, oh, wow, this one's going to bring out the neighbors, and nobody shows up. And other times you think it's something fairly innocuous, and you get a full room full of people. So it's interesting, it's fun, it's dynamic. You learn a lot about other professions. I know a little bit about engineering because I've worked with engineers so much. I know a little bit about what PD does because we've worked with them, with the sewer district and so on. So it's fun being a planner. It's fun being a planner in Apache Junction. The tools that we use are a lot of this language, a lot of this, particularly our ordinances, are all We get the framework for our codes from state law and from national planning law, and we implement it into our codes, try to make our codes fair, equitable, apply the codes evenly and fairly. Sometimes we get accused of picking on people, or people think that they're being picked on, you know, like Larry or Victor mentioned a little bit ago. You go to a neighbor's house because somebody complained about the violation, but you look down the street and there's more violations. You know, a lot of times we help our code officers interpret the codes to figure out whether there's a violation or not, and because sometimes there's a matter of interpretation. That's where our Board of Adjustment comes in, but that's also where zoning administration comes in. So there's a lot of different aspects in what we do in the planning department, on top of answering zoning questions every day, answering zoning emails every day, reviewing business licenses, issuing zoning letters, and letters of grandfather rights, and letters of zoning compliance, and things like that. So a lot to do, small division. We're growing because we're going to have to grow, and Larry is going to talk about what's happening with the state lands here in just a little bit. So it's an exciting time to be in Apache Junction, and I've probably given you a lot of information. I'd be happy to answer some questions and turn it back over to Larry to talk about state lands. Yes, ma'am.
This isn't a question, would you explain to people so that they know that land, you don't wait till a developer comes in who wants to build something and then decide how to zone it, that all the land in our city limits, even the vacant lots, they're already zoned?
Yes, the question is all the land in the city zoned? Yes, it is. A lot of Apache Junction, particularly the more rural areas, was rezoned many, many years ago before the city was a city by Pinal County. So there are some areas that are still under the old RSGR zoning, which is basically acre and a quarter residential lots for one home. And until a development comes along to rezone it to something else, a higher intensity use or commercial or something else, you know, a lot of times people think because it's vacant, there's no zoning there, and nobody's ever going to build there. Hey, my realtor told me that was going to be a park. I was going to have my view of the mountain, but no. Every property is zoned. Every property has certain development rights, and depending on what a development proposal is, that zoning may change. That vacant lot may get developed. Your views may be impacted by what goes in next door. So yes, to answer the question, every property is zoned. Is every property zoned for its optimum use? Not necessarily. That's where development comes into play.
I think I have a slide about the map viewers in a second, but I kind of want to talk about this again just for 1 second. Brian Powell, the city manager, said that if we had gotten consultants to do that, I think he said about $250,000. So we did it in-house. We're pretty proud of it. We submitted it for award last year, and maybe because of COVID, they didn't give an awards for small cities. But this thing has some unique elements that you don't see, or they're not required in the state law. So again, some of these are required: an environmental element, parks, recreation, and open space element. So environmental element, we had our intern, can't think, was it Salima? We had one of our interns no, she left. Julia. She wrote the environmental element. The Park and Rec director, Liz Langenbach, wrote the park and open space element. Heather Patel wrote the neighborhood preservation element. Downtown AJ was Kelsey, if you met Kelsey, one of our new young planners. Economic development was Janine Solly. She wrote that element for, she's our economic development director. Public safety services facilities was Rudy, but he coordinated with police, fire, library, etc. Traffic circulation was done in part, the public works director, Mike Weaver, but we had just finished our active transportation plan the year before, so that helped. Water resources was Frank Blanco, wrote a lot of that. And here we're calling it the one water element. Water is an important element. So we're trying to think of water holistically as not just groundwater or water from the CAP canal, but wastewater and water recharge, stormwater, is thinking of the water just like the hydrologic cycle. You don't see that in most general plans. You have to have a growth area element by law, cost of development. In other words, what does this plan cost to implement? Of course, the land use element that Rudy talked about, and then we have an intergovernmental cooperation element. How do we get along with our neighbors? So this is on the website. I encourage you to go look at it. The map is too small to see, but the land use map is in the back, the future land use map. It kind of zooms in on this area. Purple is the downtown, and this area here is all that state land growth down at the bottom. So this was approved by the voters, so hopefully some of you voted for it, maybe some of you voted against it, but this was on the ballot last August. It was approved by a 3-to-1 margin. So in Arizona, these have to go to the ballot box. So we're excited about that it got approved. Let's see, this one, there we go, 3-to-1 margin. Okay, that is the future land use map. As I indicated, the area that is current city limits go down to Elliott. So we're going to annex down to this, it's actually the Fry Road where the 24 is going to come through. So basically the 24 is going to come through here. We're annexing this area that's really from Elliott over to the canal. This is Gold Canyon unincorporated. Our planning area goes beyond the city limits. It actually includes Gold Canyon, and includes, I'm trying to remember this alignment here, Rudy, Germain. And then there is some alignment out to this point, that's some point out there. Then I did want to talk about this real quick. We have a great thing that's kind of happened in our city over time, Geographic Information Systems. Started the department, and it's in the Management Services Division where Al works, but J.C. Kleiner, him and Sean, basically have these mapping tools. So I was trying to so this is on the website under Development Services. There's also a section on the website where you go to I want to. It's under the I want to, and it's under maps, and under that section. So there are a bunch of different map viewers. You can look at traffic counts, you can look at the zoning map. I think it has the FEMA layers on it. This is all kind of new to get to know the city as well. So I told JC I was putting in a plug for him tonight. So again, we have a map viewer that shows upcoming projects. I did want to say, things were really busy here. In the late 90s, early 2000s, the recession hit. It was kind of quiet. We didn't see a lot of development happen. Then starting in about 2016, 17, the new Fry's went in. All the shops, the Wendy's, all that stuff kind of happened. Things happened recently, of course, was Filiberto's is just getting finished. We could talk about how we interact with contractors. That probably should have been open 2 weeks ago. Landscaping isn't done yet. Well, then we don't give an occupancy permit. So it really goes from the vision of the general plan to the zoning code to us reviewing the building plans. They demolish the old Circle K. It becomes a Filiberto's. And then they work with the health department to get their restaurant license. They work with the fire department. They work with Dave in building inspection. They work with Sam in our office on stormwater. They work with Rudy, whoever the project planner is, to make sure that they do the final touches for landscaping. And so sometimes projects looks great, and sometimes projects are a little different. So the Dutch Bros, I think, went pretty seamlessly. Another stormwater issue because there's floodplain there. So we get involved from the long-range planning view down to where Rudy or somebody else is actually making sure that 60 plants didn't die before they get their final certificate of occupancy. So that's, I think, why it makes it interesting to be a planner, because you not only can look 50 years ahead of what you think the community ought to look like or help the community do its own vision there, but then you see stuff on the ground as it's happening. So it's kind of cool. Let's see. The other thing I'm going to do real quick, because COVID, we kind of have a fun, and we run long. We need 3 hours in the future, Al. Is we do a tabletop exercise where we do a P&Z case. And this one is like a group home. So we kind of give you a scenario. We break into 4 groups. We're not going to do it tonight because you're missing it, but this is why Al said sometimes people like this session more than anything, because we sit in the conference room with tables and we break into groups. We give you a scenario, and then we have fun at kind of a mock development meeting with the planning commission, developer, the angry neighbors, and so, but we're not doing that tonight. But I kind of wanted to show you that it gives you some taste of what it would be like to be And you can always come and, at a rezoning and speak your mind at a public hearing, but we kind of do this. Real quick, I think I'm over here. I just kind of wanted to talk about, so this is Google Earth. This is not our GIS website. So basically this area to the south, this is the county, I call it the Wildcat subdivision. This is the wastewater treatment plant. We have the new water plant is in this area right in there, I guess. So what we're annexing down to now, this is Elliott right here, this line here. So we already have this in the city. That city limit goes out east to Goldfield, Rudy? Mountain View. So already city limits go out there. So what we're talking about annexing now is from Elliott down to where the 24 is going to come through. So here's the 24. It's coming along what this is, this Fry Road alignment, and in through here, and it's going to stop at Ironwood. If you drove down Ironwood today, you see that they're already constructing and moving dirt on both ends of this project here. So the development is this 4 square miles. This square mile, this one, and they're weird square miles. These are actually larger than 640 acres, so it's like 7 something. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there's a remainder piece that's part of the annexation, but only this 4 square miles got auctioned off right in here. So again, the 24, gotta zoom in down to, so we're gonna annex down to about this line. It's about 6,200 acres is the annexation. So the planning area though, the developers have to do a plan really for that really 62 plus this land that's kind of this is state land here, state land. So they have to create some master planning. They got a master plan 81 or 8,500 acres somewhere in that neighborhood. Water, sewer, stormwater, transportation, and then because they kind of have to figure out how they're ultimately going to serve this area, but because they're only doing the first 4 square miles, they got to plan the infrastructure for the other end of the pipe. So when the end of the development happens over here, they have to have a pipe here to kind of handle this development. So we're starting to see already, last night we had a plan commission meeting, we're talking about changing our subdivision regulations to handle the amount of plats. So Dave talked about 130 permits a year for a lot of those manufactured homes, mobile home set, manufactured home sets. We're going to go to that a month. So rather than 130 new houses a year, we're going to do that in a month. So we're going to be doing, these would be site-built homes. Yep, site-built homes. So there's 2 developers, D.R. Horton and Brookfield. D.R. Horton wants to do about 1,000 homes a year. Brookfield wants to do about 1,500. It adds up to about 115. You add that on top of what we're doing. So this area is going to be about another 25 to 30,000 people. Their build-out rate could be 5 to 7 years. So we have to go probably find a little bit more water for them, but everything else seems to be moving very fast. They are coming in. We're working on a development agreement with the developer for the 4 square miles. We have to have a separate development agreement with the state because the state's going to own the balance. So we have 2 development agreements we're working on, 2 rezonings. So one rezoning for the 4 square miles, another rezoning for the balance of the land that's what's going to happen in the future. That will also, so on that map, this whole area, the land use category for that area is the master plan community. So it already has its land use. Now it has to have zoning. Rudy was explaining that process. Every land has zoning. Well, right now it's zoned in the county. So the county has zoning on this. It comes into the city. We put county zoning on it for 5 minutes. So when you annex land into the city, it has to have a similar zoning that the county. That same night, the council will rezone it to MPC, Master Plan Community. So the land use district and the zoning will be one and the same. Then, so that's 2 rezonings plus the annexation. So all on one night, we're looking at July 20th. July 20th, we're going to annex all this land in. We're going to have 2 development agreements and 2 zonings that same night. And there's also the way that these developments, the infrastructure gets funded. Right now, we have a water district and a sewer district. They're actually going to create two other, because there's two developers, there's going to be two districts that help finance the water, the sewer, the roads within the development. They're called Community Facilities Districts, CFDs. So it's pretty complicated. We're trying to protect the city's interests because the development agreement, we want to make sure that we have all our bases covered, that we have facilities, police, library, things that we have up here need to happen down there. We just created a whole bunch of fees for this. We didn't have fees set up to do the rezoning, two rezonings and the two CFDs. One rezoning is $184,000. The other one's $108,000 because growth is supposed to pay for itself. So as we talked about adding new staff, we have to have, we go to these meetings, there's 10 or 12 of us in the meeting. The developer should be paying for that, not kind of out of the general fund. So we're trying to make sure that growth, how to accommodate this growth pays for itself. So I have some other maps I could show, but that's kind of the gist of it as far as what the big change that the city has seen coming up. Years ago, there was a proposal to develop about 1,000 acres kind of around the landfill before the recession. That kind of went sideways with the recession. Developer showed up at the auction, and some other guys showed up at the auction, outbid them, and then the economy tanked, and that land never got developed. So the city always expected to kind of develop along this area. I don't know if Brian's talked yet, because he always has this whole thing about the wave and the freeway was here, the water plant, sewer plant, everything was here. The city thought this was going to be developed. But actually what happened was everything down in Santan kind of leapfrogged. As planners, we don't like leapfrog. They went down there, 100,000 people. They're not even in a city. So now what we're seeing is the real estate market, I guess, shifting to where this is Eastmark, and some of the folks that were involved in Eastmark say, oh, we got the state land about a mile away. Why don't we go approach the state about auctioning this instead of what we always thought might happen up there. So the services, our services are far away. It's not ideal from a planner's perspective. It would be nice to have kind of orderly, but somebody went to the state, state's the owner of the land, the state said, oh yeah, okay, we'll auction it off. Okay, questions for me, Rudy? Yes, sir.
Yeah, real quick, in the State of the City address, there was a question about having elementary schools and maybe high schools in that area. Is that going to be possible in 5 to 7 years? Are they going to be bused into AJ, or what's going to happen?
I don't know to answer that question. I know the school district has capacity already. So because of, I guess, various laws changing at the state and charter schools, people can kind of choose where they go, right? They go over to Mesa. We went to a 4-day school week for a while. Folks left the school district, went over to a school district that had 5-day school days. So there's lots of capacity at our current school. I know they were talking to Dr. Anderson, though, about future school sites down there. So we're hopeful that it adds to our school district. Yes, sir.
Would it be appropriate to make some, kind of give my opinion on this right here for this thing?
No.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. You're here, we're amongst friends, you can say whatever you like. It's not a public hearing, I'm just going to tell you that. We did that.
I know nobody's voted on it.
Yeah, we do that all the time, but sure.
Over by the freeway, I was thinking it might be a wise idea to zone some industrial and maybe have some truck stops. Like whoever puts some truck stops there.
Yeah, the dilemma we have, that's a good comment. This is going to be the U-Haul at this intersection here at Idaho. This was an 80-acre that we hoped would be commercial back in the day before the recession. It didn't happen. The power center is, we have power centers over here. You can't have a power center at every intersection, But this land is owned by the State Land Department. This land is owned by the State Land Department. This land is owned by the State Land Department. This one has been available. Whoa, got away from me there. So we don't control this, but when we did the rezoning for the U-Haul, the 40 acres on the east side was held out as a future light industrial park similar to this area. So 40 acres doesn't get us very long in the future, but all the water, sewer, everything's there. We think that under this concept plan for the state land, because of this industrial, that, dirt roads, no water, no sewer, and there's some fissures in this area. You can see some earth fissures in here. This probably would develop industrially. This might develop more industrial so this would be a lot of land. Again, you can see the earth fissures they complicate things. This is really downstream in this recharge area, but we think that more light industrial could happen around this park. It's still close enough to the freeway. Right now, we're not seeing a lot of, for Eastmark, they're doing this corridor here now that's this kind of extension of the Elliott Road Tech Corridor. So there are jobs nearby. We'd certainly love to have them in our city rather than elsewhere, but part of the dilemma we always have is the ownership of the land. If the state's not going to make these available for commercial industrial, then if someone went to them with a project and say, hey, we want to build this is 160 acres here, so we want to build a 320-acre industrial park, and they had a plan and it was real, the state might work with it. But the state likes to, you think it would be developed already because there's a freeway there. The state kind of says, oh, the 24 is going through. I guess it is a good time to auction off some land down near the new 24. And there's going to be water and sewer. So if somebody came in, they probably would auction this off. And again, I think it would be good for us to have a jobs corridor as well. Yeah, Tess?
Would you just clarify for everyone that most of the vacant land around here is either state trust land or BLM, and we don't go and annex land. It's the developers who go to the state or whoever and request that the land be developed or is auctioned off, and then they have to request us to annex it. We just don't go out and annex land.
Yeah, Rudy will tell you, the land we have now, it took 15 annexations, I think, Rudy, to get even to here. We had to piecemeal the way the state law was written there. So yeah, we can't, this actually has to go to annex the land that we have now, had to go to the, was it the State Land Selection Board, which is the governor and the Secretary of State or somebody like that. So yeah, we can't just go out and annex this. We have to get the state permission. The other thing I wanted to point here, whoops, I didn't even mean to do that. In our general plan, people know that this mile between Lost Dutchman and McKellips is BLM and state land. In our future land use map, we made all this land use designation as conservancy. So people for a long time thought that this was our open space. It is our open space, but we don't own it. We don't control it. It's owned by the BLM, and we have some leases with the BLM where the power line is, and there's some trails there. But we think, looking 50 years out, if this green belt, if you want to call it that, of desert can be preserved, it really makes us a different community than every community around here that's just one subdivision after another. Now we know so part of that active transportation plan was to link up these areas along Siphon Draw, kind of make along the CAP, this trail is going to go all the way to Tucson. So they're trying to do a trail. Ken Taylor's coming on Tuesday night, I think, to talk about get out and recreate. So we're trying to make sure that we have these linkages, development happens along these corridors. There's another corridor along here we're trying to do. But, from here, you can, not too far to go to the state park. These are some features that we think need to be preserved, need to be placed in a long-range general plan. And to me, in my opinion, it'd be nice if the city the community would say, just like Scottsdale did, they went out and borrowed $1 billion over time and bought the McDowell Mountain Preserve. It does not exist unless the taxpayer said, yeah, we're going to tax ourselves, we're going to have a bond issue, and we are going to go to the state, we're going to go to the auction with a check. So I know there's been talk about having the rodeo grounds transferred to the city, but there's a whole lot of other BLM land. So those BLM lands are harder to trade and all that. But I think that is going to be the hallmark if you look back 50 years from now. This has always kind of been in the plan, but this was zoned RSGR. So our land use designation was like rural acre and a quarter lots. So I think we decided, hey, why don't we make this conservation? Doesn't all it is a designation. It doesn't preserve it. If people want it preserved, you're going to have to go out and buy it.
So for those online, as well as not everybody knowing all the acronyms, BLM is Bureau of Land Management. That's a federal agency. So that's federal land that we're talking about there, as opposed to state trust land, which is owned by the state of Arizona. We got two different levels of government going on there.
Right, and there's 275, this doesn't show up, but there's 275 square miles. If this wasn't in the city, it'd be this state land blue color. So in here, there is, again, state land and Bureau of Land Management land, and then you get into the Tonto, obviously north of McAllips, or north of McDowell, I mean. Okay, next. Next to it, yeah.
This might be a future class, but what are the like disaster contingency plans? Like, for example, what we just saw in Texas with the power grid failure. I mean, I hear 25,000 people come in, conservatively, that's 10,000 air conditioners, and we might have a reverse Houston where it's 120 degrees and the power grid goes down. What do we do? So how durable is that stuff, and how much thought goes into that by the city in terms of planning?
So we've been trying to espouse some planning principles in this document, and I think other cities are doing it as well. There's a concept called low impact development, that there's a handbook now that's been put out, or that's going to hopefully make it into the Maricopa Association of Governments. Low impact development is essentially not necessarily putting curb and gutter everywhere, probably having sidewalks, yes, but using green infrastructure. So instead of piping all the storm sewer underground, you can have areas along the side of the road. So if you go over to Eastmark, you actually see some of this stuff, that you're taking the storm water and you're trying to recapture a lot of it and not send it downstream. More shade trees. Phoenix has gone through a whole shade study to the heat island effect here. You know, you listen to the news, and when I grew up here, and Victor left, Rudy grew up in Nogales, you grew up in Tucson. When I grew up here, it used to get down to like 82 at night. Again, because there were hay fields next to our house, right? Kind of like, why is Gilbert still kind of a cool spot, right? Because there's still those farm fields there. When those turn into rooftops, you know, last summer, it didn't get below 90 some nights. That's really unlivable. And so we have to be thinking about sustainability and long-term, you know, shade, and, you know, I think there's going to be more and more of this rather than have blacktop everywhere. Some cities are going to white topping their roads. So the heat island of a metro area that's now 4.5 million, that's going to be 10 million, you know, is it going to be livable here in 2050, 2060 when all these folks move here? They're talking about the overnight low not getting below 100 here at some point. So that's why these green belts make sense to me. That's why more tree planting. That's why along North Apache Trail we're trying to do streetscaping and put some palo verdes. Everything is xeriscape to try to be more cognizant of that. They're working, the developers are working with SRP. Again, I think that nuke plant is almost as old as I am. That was built, I don't know how many more years, they were built for 50 years, it's almost 60 now. We get a big supply of energy from there, plus the hydro, plus where the upcoming, you know, solar and wind. And again, Texas is a different story from everything I've read, because they're not on a nationwide grid. And they didn't winterize much of their stuff, whether it was oil or gas for peaking plants. So air conditioning, yeah, it's an issue, but insulation, Dave talked about that new type of construction. You know, they're building houses. I've seen houses that take 3 years in Europe because they're like zero energy houses. And I did that when I remodeled my 1955 house. I furred out the inside of my house with 6 inches, 2x6s, and I spray foamed it. Then I went up in the attic and I put in R50 because electricity was cheap here in 1955. And I have R50 in my attic just like I had R50 in Wisconsin. And I put vents. I had no soffit vents in my house. And electricity was cheap here. And so now I basically did the opposite of what I did in Wisconsin. I had R50 in Wisconsin, I got R50 here. I pay less than $70 a month for my electric bill year-round. I don't have a house full of kids anymore, but I'm just saying, so people have to start thinking differently, and that's why we're thinking differently for this development. We're hoping that people use different thought patterns so it's just not the same old, and just a continuation of what we've been doing. So, and everybody here has to do that themselves, you know. as, again, older housing stock, people think about cool roofs, and they have seminars at some cities that teach you how to put in rain barrels, and I think as we mature as a city of 40,000, soon to be, well, 80 in the winter, to start having some of these programs for citizens of how they can, kind of green up start at their own local level. So yeah, I guess they have the power. Right now they're talking about doing more power at the Glen Canyon Dam, pumping water back over and then doing electricity again, and then there's fights with that. But so I think the whole energy thing is going to change. Yes, Darryl.
Mentioned the dams, they do that on a regular basis. They'll let water out during the day to make electricity,
Uh-huh.
and then they draw the water back, like they'll draw water out of Canyon Lake and pump it back into Apache, and then the next day take that same water, so it's constantly going back and forth, because it's cheaper for them to pump that water back into the next reservoir in the evening when electricity rates are cheaper. So they do the same thing that we do. It conserves energy. I know that because I do inspections of the dams, and it's really unique to see how they produce that electricity.
Yeah, they're talking about that on the news now at Glen Canyon, but that there's some lawsuits already starting with the native tribes and stuff. So again, everybody's got to start thinking about so this could have been the 2020 plan, but we wanted the 2020-2050 plan to start, it's just not a 10-year plan. We really should be thinking 30 years out. And a lot of zoning decisions, if we're making a zoning decision, the houses are going to be there 100 years. So if that's the right land use, it's not just for that developer. I tell that to developers. Well, I'm not going to, or you talk to a homeowner, I'm not going to live there that long. Well, the next person is. You hear stories in the Middle East where people have lived in those homes for 800 years, those families. We just don't think that way in this country. They all got blown up in Syria, but those people live in in Iraq and Iran. They live in those homes for 800 years. 800 years. We just don't think that far out. And so now we're building stuff that would last 75 years. I didn't mean that to be a joke. I mean it sadly that your home that you've had for 800 years is now in a civil war and it's gone.
Well, no, but you're building a house that's going to last 75 years, but the plastic that you threw away in the garbage is going to last 1,000.
Or longer, yeah. So there's a lot of, we can't fix everything in AJ, but I do think we can start locally here. So I do have to say that Al, I'm a graduate of this program, right? You didn't mention that. I went to this program. I moved here in 2014, and how am I going to learn about the city? So I went, and we had 12 classes, Al, for you people. How many do you have now? 6? 4? How many do you have to? Oh, 8. We had to go to 12. You had to go to 12 when you first did it, didn't you?
We're more efficient.
So I went to 12 nights of this, and I learned a lot about the city. I think it's great that, department heads, you get hired here. I think they ought to make you come and do this so you learn about what the community is all about, and I think that just makes you a better employee and kind of better understand the community. So thank you all for thank you for paying attention. Thank you for being nice to us, and you know where we're at. We're right around the corner, so. All right, you betcha.
That's correct.
Al used to bring food. I mean, I don't know what's happening to this program, Al.
No, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. Okay, 2 weeks from now, we get to go delving into a little bit more of what we sort of alluded to tonight. We could talk a little bit more about utilities. So public works, streets and whatnot, water and sewer. That's March 10th. We'll be here. And then March 24th, the next class after that, animals, law, and order. Can you guess? You have to figure that part out. All right, I will make sure to send links around to everybody from things that we talked about tonight as well. If anybody has questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Everybody have a very nice evening. We will see you all in 2 weeks. And as always, please drive home safely. Good night.